Okay, we're talking about like the value of a particular book. We're often talking about the issue and the grade. Are there other factors that could contribute to demand?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a phenomenon that I'm seeing more today than ever. It's probably going to increase as time goes on, which is
Hey, everybody, welcome to Keston's Old School Comic Books. Got two very special guests. Matt Nelson is here from CGC. Ben Labonog will join us as well. So, Matt, in general, what makes a comic book high demand?
obviously the big driver is going to be first appearances. And then, of course, covers have become like a big driver of late. And then there's other factors like rarity, characters that appear in the book, or just the genre or the title or the company.
Matt, I also know that demand is a fickle beast, meaning that sometimes a book can be in high demand one year and it's not in high demand the next. And so, can you give some examples of books that were once super hot but have cooled off in recent months or even years or decades?
In terms of decades, cooling off over decades, you could point to broad areas of comics, particularly genres. Two that come to mind would be Western comics and strip reprints. Strip reprints had their heyday in the 30s and a part of the genesis of comic books leading up to superheroes. And then Westerns followed shortly thereafter. I think 40s and certainly by the 50s, those were hot. And I think the reason those were so hot, or at least more hot back in the day than they are now, is because the audience or the collectors that were collecting comics, say when collecting started in the 60s and 70s, had grown up reading those books, and so they're going to collect what they love. And of course, a lot of those people were reading the strip reprints in the 30s and the Western books, and of course, Westerns were super hot in the 50s on TV and the movies, tons of Westerns. So, but over time, we've noticed that at least the Western genre has kind of become a thing of the past. And then as far as like individual issues or characters, certainly ones that get hot and come down in a shorter amount of time, I'm going to say the movies are a big driver on that one. Back in the day, things moved more slowly, say in the 80s or 90s, when a character or a series would become hot because a popular artist would come onto the series and kind of revitalize it, which would generate or heat up collector interest in that run. But nowadays, certainly over the past 10 or 20 years, we've seen that accelerated with the movies, where, certainly as soon as the movie's greenlit, we would start to see demand skyrocket. Examples like Green Lantern and Spider-Man, and particularly Avengers, where, Avengers was a pretty dead title compared to the other Marvel titles there for a number of years. And then when the Avengers movies hit, and they were a huge hit, those really took off in value. On the flip side, you see the demand come down once the movies come out, particularly depending on how the movie does. If the movie does poorly, then demand cools off really fast. But of course, if the movie does great and there's plans to have a sequel, then the demand usually sticks and can actually go higher in subsequent releases.
I'm going to ask you sort of the flip side of that. And so, can you provide some examples of books that were cold for a long time and then really went up? And that could be over the decades, over the years, or just recently.
Sure. Well, I think the answer is kind of the same, or it can be framed the same way. You've got genres, and then you've got characters. One genre that's really heated up recently that surprised me is romance, which, for years was considered to be similar to Westerns and kind of a dead genre, because, well, I guess we could, pontificate as to why that's the case, but you might say that maybe there's just not as many female collectors, or there's not, reoccurring characters in romance books, or whatever the case is. Some of them have got great art, particularly the Matt Baker books. Some of them got great covers, great dialogue and stories, great publishers like St. John. And it's just an area, I think, that given those things and given the fact that it was cold for so long, was enticing to collectors these days, because people, I noticed the trends are people want to chase something new. You do superheroes for a while, you do bronze, you go to silver, you go to gold. You want to move on to something new, the thrill of chase. And so I think romance books proved to be a good breeding ground for interest. Again, the movies, we were talking about the downslide. Great examples like Guardians of the Galaxy. That's a perfect example, I think, of an instance where characters in particular issues and even titles took off, and they were cold forever, and then the movies came out and they took off in price. But Since the movies have passed now, it's been a number of years, they've cooled down. Like, was it Hulk? Is it 271, I believe, the first Rocky Raccoon?
There have been some books that have just been rock solid through the decades. Could you give a few examples of those rock solid books?
Yeah, well, the big keys, obviously the biggest keys, AF-15, Action 1, all the first appearances of all the classic characters, and all the characters that we know and love, like Batman, Superman, Spider-Man. Those are going nowhere. The characters are so well formed, and so many great stories have been written about them. Of course, so many great artists as well, that they've become the bedrock of collecting, or of the hobby, really. So I think those are always the ones that the collectors gravitate towards, at least initially, and probably the most collectors do, because from an investment standpoint, they're the safest. They're like your blue chip items. The cover-driven market has certainly heated up a lot in the past few years. I think that started with the photojournals in the 90s, and then of course with the internet and people's access to covers online the past 20, 25 years has really fueled the cover-driven market. And again, also, I think particularly in the golden age and the 50s, the thrill of the chase we were talking about, where people are looking for something really cool that they've never tried to get before. And now you see people gravitating towards these Chesler covers and these horror covers, and books that we would have gotten back in the day for a couple $100, and now they're selling for 10,000 and 20,000 and 30,000. And I think they're rare enough, particularly the golden age, that supply never outstrips the demand. So, even the slightest bit of demand increase can drastically increase the value of the comic books, because there's not enough to go around. It takes a handful of guys that want a punch 12, and there's not that many punch 12s out there. And so I think that's why you see the price jump so dramatically. The market being down right now, we see golden age actually holding its prices and or its values, and actually going up in some cases. And I think rarity is a big factor on that, coupled with that demand.
Okay, we're talking about like the value of a particular book. We're often talking about the issue and the grade. Are there other factors that could contribute to demand?
Yes, absolutely. And this is a phenomenon that I'm seeing more today than ever. It's probably going to increase as time goes on, which is eye appeal. That's one factor. It's a big one, and particularly for those kind of books, particularly for low-grade books, which would be obviously your biggest keys in your golden age. Eye appeal is everything. So in grading, as the grade gets lower, you can have drastically different-looking copies. One example is a 1/8, two 1/8s. One has pieces missing, it's faded, it's stained, there's tears, there's writing on it, creases through the cover. And the other one has a spine split, a fully split spine where the cover's in two pieces. But the rest of the book, when you put it all together in the holder, it looks like an 8.0. And there are certainly instances these days where at auction or even private sale, particularly through dealers that are keen to this, will price those nicer looking books higher, sometimes considerably higher based on the eye appeal, and it actually transcends the grade. I've known dealers who can get 2530 guide or even higher for a nice looking 1/8 in that example. Another one is going to be page quality. Obviously people on a more subtle level, people chase the higher page quality. White pages bring a premium, particularly in the vintage books. And of course, on the opposite end, if you have lower page qualities, certainly like brittle or slightly brittle or light tan off white, that could potentially hurt the value of the book in comparison to another copy that's similar in grade. But I've seen times where, particularly in high grade Marvels, let's say, there are collectors who are up in that stratosphere, and they're looking for books that are white. The white covers are as white as possible, and a deep ink strike. And we see those often with Marvel books like X-Men 1, Avengers 1, Amazing Fantasy 15. But every once in a while, we get a copy through that the colors just pop. And, either it was early in the print run or when they changed the inks, or it was just preserved very well. But there's also other cases like pedigree. That's a good one. People who are familiar with pedigrees and certain pedigrees more than others that drive value up. Right now, these days, the Okajima collection is bringing a huge premium. In fact, I think those are bringing more than Mile Highs in a lot of cases, because the backstory is so fascinating, such a historically and culturally important aspect of that collection. But then also the Mile Highs, just knowing that it's the best collection of all time. In many cases, the copies that come out are the best existing and certainly look the best. And like we were talking about earlier, their colors and their brightness and whiteness. And then there's other, ancillary things like SIG series. You might, having a signature on the book, which is another service that CGC offers. And, at this point, SIG series has gotten huge. And so that certainly adds value to the book in a big way sometimes, depending on how rare the signature is.
Yeah, I heard Stan Lee is a real rare signature.
Yeah, well, like Hulk 181, it's like lots of Hulk 181s, but lots of collectors that want them, just like they want the Stan Lee SIG. So it's the supply and demand is certainly an interesting aspect of SIG series because you've got so many iterations. You've got not only how many signatures the person put out, but which books they sign, what were the grades of those books, were there other signatures in the books? Like Star Wars 1, you see that a lot, where you can have 1, 2, 5, 10 signatures from cast members, the artist, the writer, and all these different combinations will create different levels of value for these books. So it's a spider web of value when you bring SIG series into the mix.
Now, Matt, if you're allowed to say it, is there a particular book or series that you're just surprised how popular they are or it is today?
That's an opinion-based question to me. Basically, what my answer would be is I don't know why that's hot. I don't know why people are collecting that. And we all have those. We walk around with those opinions, I'm sure. But I recognize that if something is hot that I don't understand, then it's something that I just don't get, that other people get. And enough people get it to make it hot. And so I must be the one that's missing it. I mean, I've been doing this long enough now that we always talk about this in the grading room. It's like, we think about the old days. We've been, I was around when a lot of these books were selling for a fraction of what they sell for now, or even a couple of dollars. Particularly the Bronze Age books. Even a lot of the Silver Age. You can go box diving and find later issues of Tales of Suspense, Tales to Astonish for $5 a piece in nice grade. Nova 1 selling for $5 or $10, stacks of them at the show in perfect condition. And so I think for me, it's just in general, I'm on a regular basis shocked by the prices that these books bring. But at the same time, I think it's testament to the strength of the market and people's interest in comic books.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Sometimes I'm looking at a book and I'm looking at people just drooling over it. I'm like, what in the hell are they thinking? I would never choose that book. And then on the other end, there's a particular book I look at. I'm like, oh my God, that is fantastic. It's so interesting. The character's interesting, or maybe it's the cover that's amazing, but nobody else gets it.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, I see all the time at the shows the glass case, and it's got the AF-15. Some really rare golden age book, a pedigree, a mile high, 9.6, and in the middle is a Hulk 181. And the kids come up and they're just like, "Oh my God, look at the Hulk!" And I'm just sitting there going, "Oh my God, I've seen these other books are so much more rare and cool in my mind because you see Hulk 181 a lot in my job."
How about you, Ben? Is there a book or two that you really think is great, and then you figure out like nobody else is catching on to your genius?
There's a lot of books out there as a timely collector that I've never got into, and I don't knock certain books. Cap 46, Marvel Mystery 46. I have never desired those books. I don't know why. I just don't. I probably would rather buy another copy of the books on my wall first, 2 or 3, 4 times over, than buy a copy of those books. It's just personal preference, and also just kind of what hits you in your early collecting period. I've been in this 30 plus years, and the photo journal, when I bought that in '94, was really what captivated me. But in general, I'm kind of a 38 to 40 collector. The earlier, the better. And I like 1939 dirt on my comics.
And you may have remembered Matt talking about like eye appeal. What are certain characteristics of books that might make something pop more than the grade might suggest? The best example I've ever heard of that is actually from Ben, describing what he looks for in a Fantastic Four #1. If you want to check out Ben's thoughts, check out this video. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and I hope to see you around real soon.